What is life if not hunger disguised as form? Every being that breathes, crawls, speaks, or dreams does so not out of a meek desire to persist, but from an ancient thirst to overcome. Life does not whisper, survive. It screams, ascend. Beneath every heartbeat is not the fear of death, but the intoxication of victory. It is not safety the soul craves, it is mastery. One does not live merely to exist, one lives to grow teeth, to stretch claws across the edge of the possible. The infant wails not because it is weak, but because it demands the world's attention. The child breaks toys not out of cruelty, but because creation and destruction are twin flames in the crucible of becoming. Even the smallest organism strains toward the sun, not in submission to nature, but in defiance of it. In that upward stretch is the germ of power. Power, pure, blind, radiant, is the secret melody behind all things. To speak of life without power is to speak of fire without heat, or of oceans without depth. What we call instinct is merely the muscle memory of domination. The root of desire is never peace, but conquest. The scholar does not read to understand, but to possess. The lover does not embrace to comfort, but to engulf. Even compassion, in its deepest crevices, is a strategy of influence, to sway, to seduce, to fold another's suffering into one's own shadow. The animal knows it. The tree knows it. Even the stone, resting under centuries of silence, knows it in its inertia. It resists the rain, endures the wind, digs its own grave into the earth, asserting itself without motion. All that exists longs to exceed itself. This is not evolution. This is not adaptation. This is will. Will not toward survival, but toward power. One does not write symphonies to please ears, but to subjugate them. One does not build cathedrals to praise gods, but to etch one's ego across centuries. Even the saint, who flees the city for the desert, does so with the proud intoxication of self-mastery. To deny the flesh is not to extinguish desire, but to control it absolutely. In asceticism, too, is power. The monk who kneels in prayer may believe he serves a deity, but secretly he rules over himself with an iron crown. Language itself was forged not for communion, but for command. The first word was not a question. It was a decree. The first sentence was not a lullaby. It was an order. One speaks not to share truth, but to bend another's perception. Every dialogue is a duel, every word a blade. Even silence can be tyrannical if timed with enough precision. The one who speaks last does not always win, but the one who speaks first lays the trap. The great error of modern man is to believe he wishes peace. What he truly craves is a battleground that does not shame him. In the boardroom, in the courtroom, in the bedroom, power shifts hands like a chalice of sacred fire. To touch it is to risk being burned, but still every soul stretches toward its flame. Better to be scorched than to be dim. The sick seek healing not because they love life, but because they detest being weak. The artist does not create beauty for beauty's sake, but to assert vision over chaos. The ruler does not seek order, but obedience. Even the victim, in their suffering, seeks a subtle empire of guilt, a kingdom where pain is currency and pity is power. To reduce life to survival is to castrate the spirit. Survival is a mechanic, power is a destiny. Nature does not care who lives, but it does make monuments of those who rise. The eagle does not fly to escape predators. It flies to look down. The storm does not exist to cleanse. It exists to remind the earth who is sovereign. There is no morality in this principle, only fire. The will to power is neither good nor evil. It is beyond them. It is the trembling engine behind gods and monsters alike. It animates saints, tyrants, poets, and lunatics. It is the breath behind all creation and all ruin. It whispers not, live well, but become more. In its gaze, peace is cowardice, comfort is death, and love is a battlefield masked in tenderness. Morality is not truth, it is strategy. It is not born in the hearts of angels, but in the clenched fists of the powerless. The great deception of the age is the belief that moral codes descend from heaven or rise from reason. They do neither. They crawl from the wounds of resentment. Where the strong act, the weak moralize. Where the lion roars, the lamb bleats against cruelty. But the bleating is not innocence, it is envy in disguise. The first laws were not written by the just, but by the frightened. Every commandment is a scar, every virtue a chain hammered by trembling hands onto the wrists of giants. The origin of thou shalt not is not wisdom, it is revenge. The weak, unable to punish with sword or flame, sharpen their tongues into commandments. They smear blood as sin. They baptize fear as compassion. They invent heaven because they cannot bear the earth. Observe the virtues most celebrated by the herd. Humility, meekness, patience, self-denial. Each one is a euphemism for impotence. These are not strengths, they are rebrandings of submission. The lowly man praises humility because he cannot endure pride. The coward praises peace because he dreads the crash of power. The impotent preaches chastity, for the fire of desire threatens to consume what little self-control remains. The poor declare wealth corrupt, not because it is, but because they do not possess it. Behind every moral rule lies a confession, often an accusation painted as holiness. What calls itself good today is nothing more than an alliance of the mediocre, a league of the leveled, a conspiracy against distinction. The average man does not wish to rise, he wishes to pull down. And when he cannot climb to the mountain, he poisons the air around it, so that no one may breathe freely at the summit. He speaks not from a love of equality, but from hatred of excellence. He does not destroy the idol because it is false, but because it is taller than he is. Even compassion, this sacred cow of the modern world, is a disguised dagger. Compassion speaks the language of care while masking the glee of control. To help someone is, all too often, to gain power over them. The helper becomes the judge, the helped, the debtor. And when the debtor dares to rise, to refuse pity, to shed victimhood, he is accused of arrogance. The moral system cannot allow the healed to walk away unbound. It needs its wounded as trophies. The priest knows this well. The pulpit is not a place of enlightenment. It is a throne of manipulation. The preacher, cloaked in virtue, distributes guilt-like coins to the poor. Sin is a tax, repentance its interest, and redemption always just out of reach. The faithful crawl not toward salvation, but toward approval. They learn to love their chains, to call their submission devotion. Morality is not the victory of the divine, it is the cleverness of the weak institutionalized. Even the law, that so-called triumph of civilization, is the fossil of conquest. It is not justice carved in marble, but the echo of past victors dressing their dominance in robes of fairness. What one century calls a crime, the next calls necessity. Morality shifts with the wind of power. To call something evil is merely to declare war in soft language. The guillotine, the cross, the courtroom, all have served the same master in different masks. Every time the strong asserts his will, the weak cries tyranny. But what is tyranny if not the inability of the many to restrain the few who do not wish to bow? The truly powerful do not obey, they create. They do not wait for permission, they declare. And in response, the world invents morality to cage them. To cut their wings, they wrap them in guilt. To silence their truth, they accuse them of pride. The prophets become madmen, the rebels become heretics, the rulers become monsters. This is the true psychology of virtue, a theater staged by those who cannot command, but can still condemn. The mask of goodness conceals not love, but vengeance. The eyes that weep for justice do not seek balance, they seek reversal. They do not desire the fall of oppression, they crave to become the oppressors cloaked in righteousness. Morality is the last weapon of the defeated, a dagger hidden in a prayer. It promises heaven, but only as an apology for hell on earth. There are no equals in nature, only dominators and the dominated, creators and imitators, lions and sheep. Beneath the illusions of social contracts and democratic dreams lies the eternal war between two opposing psychological worlds, that of the master and that of the slave. These are not roles one chooses. They are instincts, pulsations of the soul, embedded in the marrow. They speak in every gesture, every silence, every law, and every rebellion. The master is not made by title or by wealth, but by the intoxication of his own self-command. He does not look outward for permission, nor downward for pity. He affirms life not because it is good, but because it is his. He does not ask, "What is allowed?" but declares, "This is mine." His morality is self-made, sculpted by experience and danger, tempered in the fire of solitude. He creates values like an artist splashes color on a blank canvas, not to please, but to declare, to impose, to immortalize. The slave, by contrast, begins with comparison. He defines himself not by who he is, but by what he is not. He sees the strength of others and calls it arrogance. He sees the joy of others and brands it sin. His world is built from negation, from refusal. He is the creature of no, of boundary, of retreat. His virtue is reaction. He watches the master ascend and begins not to climb but to conspire. He speaks in whispers, in prayers, in trembling demands for justice. Not because he believes in fairness, but because he hopes for reversal. The master lives by instinct. His body is his compass, his desire his law. He does not repress himself to fit a mold. He reshapes the mold with the weight of his will. When he loves, it is possession. When he destroys, it is art. Even his silence speaks louder than the sermons of the slave. He does not explain himself. He does not justify. His presence alone becomes the axis around which the world begins to turn. The slave lives by memory. His soul is a ledger of wounds. Every insult, every defeat, every humiliation becomes sacred, nurtured like an altar of grievances. He does not forgive, not truly. He delays, he waits. His forgiveness is often a disguised vengeance. His humility is a strategy. He praises meekness only until his numbers swell, and then he demands submission in return. The slave does not dream of liberty. He dreams of reversal, of his foot upon the neck of yesterday's master. In every society, these two psychologies dance in conflict. The master builds civilization, the slave builds its morality. The master speaks of excellence, courage, and beauty, the slave of fairness, equality, and safety. The master walks alone, surrounded by silence and the abyss. The slave gathers in crowds, clinging to warmth and shared weakness. The master creates gods in his own image, gods of thunder, chaos, war. The slave builds idols of mercy, patience, and suffering. The world of the master is vertical, higher, stronger, rarer. He aspires like a flame. He climbs not to be seen but because height is in his nature. The world of the slave is horizontal, shared, flattened, democratized. He fears difference. He fears greatness because he cannot imitate it. And what cannot be imitated must be condemned. The slave prefers a world without peaks, without risk, without rupture. He calls it peace. The master calls it death. The master does not fear pain. Pain is part of growth, part of power. He does not hide from it. He studies it, absorbs it, bends it to his will. The slave sanctifies pain as virtue only because it is all he has known. He romanticizes suffering because he cannot escape it. He cannot overcome, so he builds an altar around the wound. He tells himself that he suffers for goodness, for truth, for others. But secretly he suffers for powerlessness, and he learns to love his chains. Even in rebellion, the slave remains a slave. He does not revolt to create new values but to impose old wounds. His revolution is a cry for recognition, not transcendence. He does not seek freedom. He seeks to be the new jailer. Behind his slogans of justice lies a heart bloated with envy. He does not want the master's strength. He wants him humiliated, reduced, erased. To speak of psychology without speaking of power is blindness. The mind is not a neutral mirror. It is a battlefield. In every heart, the master and slave vie for dominance. Some suffocate their inner tyrant with guilt. Others crucify their inner rebel with pride. Few dare to listen to both and walk the tightrope between creation and resentment. Power never reveals itself naked. It arrives clothed, perfumed, veiled behind symbols, cloaked in ideals. The world fears power that declares itself openly, just as a child fears the storm before it understands the rain. Raw domination is obscene to the crowd. It must be dressed in righteousness, in justice, in necessity. Thus, the history of humanity is not the history of power alone, but of its disguises. Every age wears its own mask, every civilization its own costume drama. Do not trust the words of the ruler, study his silences. Do not believe in his laws, watch the tremor in his gaze when he signs them. The more power one wields, the more carefully one must play the role. A king must smile like a saint while he sentences dissenters to silence. The priest must speak of love while locking chains around the soul. The general must praise peace while sharpening his sword. The more brutal the act, the softer the language that surrounds it. Euphemism is the dialect of dominance. No one seizes power by confessing to it. They come bearing gifts, They promise safety, unity, salvation. Beware the one who speaks most of peace, he prepares for war. Beware the face that smiles without fault. Behind it lies a calculation so cold it no longer requires cruelty. To command without appearing to command, that is the perfection of power. The tyrant shouts, the true master whispers through symbols, rituals, and institutions that outlive him. The weak demand truth, the strong perform it. Truth is not a thing to be uncovered, but a performance to be directed. And what is civilization if not a stage? A grand pageant in which every actor denies the script while clinging to it like gospel. The philosopher dons the robe of objectivity. The banker recites hymns to stability. The politician wears the mask of service, the philanthropist that of compassion. But each move, each smile, each trembling hand pressed to a podium is theater. The real decisions happen behind curtains, always behind curtains. Even the rebel wears a mask. He claims to tear them away, but his face is already painted with the colors of his cause. He performs the part of the uncorrupted, the pure voice of resistance. But no revolt is born without rehearsal. He, too, seeks power, only through inverse means. The revolutionary does not destroy the mask. He merely inverts it, paints it red instead of gold, black instead of white. He plays the same game as the sovereign, only upside down. Power fears only one thing: exposure without control. To be seen too clearly, to be understood too directly, is to become vulnerable. And so it wraps itself in narratives, myths, ideals. Every palace must also be a temple. Every throne must seem ordained. Even dictators quote scripture. Even warlords cite philosophy. Power that appears without meaning is unstable. Power that wears the face of destiny becomes eternal. And thus, even chaos must be choreographed. Look at the faces carved in marble. Do they not smile? Do they not weep? The emperors who burned cities had their visages sculpted in serene dignity. No ruler commissions a statue of his brutality. He wants to be remembered as father, savior, chosen one. And the people, hungry for stories more than truth, accept it. The mask is not imposed, it is desired. The herd loves to be lied to, as long as the lie flatters their fear and promises them purpose. Even the self becomes a mask. One learns to perform the role of I, as one performs any character. We rehearse our identities before mirrors, in conversation, in solitude. We choose masks not because we are deceitful, but because the self is too wild, too fractured, too contradictory to show in its full. The mask is not merely a cover. It is a crystallization of power. One becomes what one pretends to be, until the mask hardens into flesh. The greatest power lies in the one who forgets he is acting. When the mask fuses with the face, when the theater becomes indistinguishable from reality, then command becomes effortless. There is no need to order when all have rehearsed their roles. The judge does not question the law. The soldier does not question the war. The child does not question the anthem. The mask has won. The play writes itself. The director is absent, but the show continues. Every empire falls, but the costumes remain. They are passed from corpse to corpse, worn anew with each new generation that believes itself original. Yet nothing is more ancient than a mask. Nothing is more modern than illusion. The crowd cheers for the actor who cries on cue, and trembles before the king who smiles like a man. To be free is not to be safe. It is to be exposed. Freedom is not a meadow of choices, but an abyss of consequence. The weak cry out for liberation only to collapse under its weight. The strong, when faced with the same void, do not flinch. They do not ask what is permitted, but what they can endure. For true freedom is not given, it is seized. And once seized, it demands more than obedience ever did. Slavery is light, for it carries no responsibility. Power is heavy, for it demands creation in the face of nothingness. The man who is free has no gods to serve, no orders to follow, no morality to shield him. He is naked before the world, trembling with possibility. But most do not want possibility. They want a master with a kind face. They want rules that absolve them of decision. They long for chains with velvet padding. They would rather kneel before idols than stand before silence. Freedom terrifies because it demands authorship, and most men would rather plagiarize their lives than write them. But the one who dares to will his own values must stare into the abyss with open eyes. The absence of divine command does not liberate him. It challenges him. With no higher law, he becomes lawgiver. With no meaning given, he becomes meaning maker. This is not a gift, but a burden. For every action now belongs to him fully, its glory and its ruin. There is no scapegoat left, no priest, no prophet, no parent. He alone bears the weight of his becoming. The burden of power is precisely this, that nothing restrains you but yourself. The tyrant is not the one who breaks rules, but the one who no longer needs them. He who has truly ascended does not answer to punishment, nor reward, nor opinion. And so he must be harder than law, more silent than judgment, more cruel than fate. He becomes his own executioner, his own architect, his own god. Power is not exercised over others first. It is first exercised over oneself. To command the world, one must first conquer the chaos within. But few survive this confrontation. Many who taste freedom fall into madness, for they cannot bear the weight of their own will. They cry for structure, for boundaries, for the soft tyranny of the collective. And so they retreat into ideologies, identities, causes. They trade the wild fire of liberty for the warmth of the herd. They write manifestos not to express their power, but to hide from it. Their slogans are not affirmations but shields against responsibility. Even revolution becomes a form of slavery when it is driven by resentment and not by the will to create anew. To be free is to be alone. Not lonely, but fundamentally solitary. The free spirit does not depend on consensus. He does not crave agreement. He does not fear being misunderstood. His thoughts are forged in solitude, his values chiseled in the absence of applause. The burden of power is the burden of being misunderstood forever. He who creates new values must walk through the desert, mocked by those who worship old statues, threatened by those who fear the dawn. The higher one climbs, the fewer the companions. And yet, it is in this solitude that power ripens, not in noise, but in silence, not in approval, but in self-overcoming. Power does not bloom in the spotlight, but in the shadow where one wrestles with one's deepest instincts. It is there that the false self is stripped away, there that the comfortable illusions of duty, morality, and fear are burned to ash. What remains is the raw, seething core, the furnace of becoming. The one who survives it emerges not with certainty, but with vision. Not with commandments, but with the courage to affirm life as it is, brutal, beautiful, and his. The herd seeks direction, the free man seeks danger. The herd cries out for protection, the free man plunges into uncertainty. He does not ask whether the path is safe, but whether it is worthy. He does not measure value by consensus, but by intensity. He does not flee suffering, he integrates it. For he knows that the path to power is paved not with victories, but with wounds transformed into weapons. Power is not control, it is transcendence. Not dominance over others, but elevation beyond limits. To possess it is not to have authority, but to embody necessity. The one who bears the burden of power is not driven by desire for recognition, but by the compulsion to express what he is. He cannot help but become what he must. He does not choose his destiny. It erupts from within him like lightning from a black sky. Freedom is not his right, it is his cross. And power, far from liberation, is the heaviest chain of all when one is finally free enough to wear it without illusion. The psychology of power is not a philosophy for the comfortable. It is a mirror held to the trembling soul of man, who hides behind morals, masks, and illusions to escape the terror of his own potential. What parades as virtue is often fear in disguise. What is praised as humility is the vengeance of the lowly dressed in white. In the theater of civilization, the actors forget their lines and call it progress, while those who write the play in blood and fire are exiled as madmen or crowned as gods. To understand power is to stand at the edge of freedom and refuse to blink. It is to recognize that the world does not rest on justice or truth, but on force, of will, of creation, of becoming. The weak moralize it, the herd disguises it, the priest sanctifies it, but the rare soul dares to embody it, not to dominate others, but to overcome himself, to carve values from chaos, to affirm life not because it is good, but because it is his to shape, his to burn through, his to crown with meaning. In the ruins of old commandments, amid the shattered idols of inherited belief, rises the figure of the one who creates. His enemies call him monstrous. His disciples call him genius, but he asks for neither praise nor forgiveness. He simply becomes. He is the answer to the abyss, not with doctrine, but with danger, not with promises, but with presence. In him, power no longer wears a mask. It becomes a face that does not beg to be understood, only to be seen.